Hi guys! Welcome to your next lesson in topic 8. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about resource use and why that's important for the human population of the planet. We're going to define what resources are, how we value them, and how that value can shift over time. So let's get started. The first thing that I want you to think about is all of the resources that you use every day. What are they? You could think about using water, you could think about using electricity, which means that you're probably using some kind of a fossil fuel, the food that you use, the land that you use to live on, however you power yourself to get around. Maybe it's a bicycle and that's made of raw materials. Maybe it's a car and that is burning gas. Of all of those things, what is the most valuable resource for you? Is it food? Is it water? Is it the beauty of nature? And how did you decide what the most valuable resource was? So why is water more valuable than paper, for example? Or the other way around, why is paper more valuable to you than water? How we think about resources is dependent on, first of all, our environmental value system, and second of all, the culture and current valuation of different resources in our world. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, and as we're diving into it, I want you to keep in mind the resources that you thought were important in this question and why. So when we talk about resource use, we talk about both natural capital and natural income. These vocabulary words should seem a little bit familiar. We talked about this way back in topic 1. Natural capital are resources which have a value to humans. They can be renewable things or non-renewable things. So for example, we use water, which is technically a rechargeable resource, as a source of natural capital for a lot of different things. We also use fossil fuels, which is a non-renewable source of natural capital, for a lot of things as well. And they're all different values that you can assign to these different kinds of capital. We'll get into that a little bit more in the next slide. One of the things that you can look at in a general way is the natural income, so the yield produced by the capital. And you can talk about use or non-use when you talk about natural income. So if you're looking at a tree, for example, you could look at the amount of paper produced as the natural income from that resource. You could also look at the aesthetic beauty of the tree's existence as a natural income for that resource. So let's talk a little bit about the different ways that we can measure the value of resources. When we look at valuing natural capital, the use valuation is its monetary value. So it's its price, the amount of ecological function value it provides us with, or the recreational use that we can get out of it. So here you have a strip mine. And the value of this is obviously the value of the minerals that we are getting out of the strip mine. We've decided not to value the land just for its existence. We've sort of cast away the ecological function of this land in this example because we're destroying its ecological function in mining it. But the value here is monetary. This obviously whatever is in this strip mine has a monetary value. You can also look at a non-use valuation, and that's just the intrinsic value of the land, or the idea that it might have a future value in other generations. So for example, the thought that this forest has a value just in its existence is a non-use value. And this doesn't even take into account ecological function. So ecological function is the idea that, like, the forest produces oxygen. And that actually does have a monetary value that we can calculate and discuss. So that goes on the use valuation side. But the non-use value is just the idea that, like, this is a nice place to take a walk. And those are the two main ways that we value natural capital, through its use valuation and its non-use valuation. It's a little bit complicated to consider that just on its own, and it's made more complicated by the idea that use valuation changes significantly over time, and so does the value of non-use valuation. So when we talk about natural capital, we say that it is dynamic. So that obviously means that the value of natural capital is changing all the time, depending on society's needs. So one great example is cork trees in Portugal. Used to be a tremendous market because cork was the only thing that you could use to protect wine. And the wine industry globally is worth trillions of dollars. So protecting that resource of making wine meant that you needed cork trees. Now we can make artificial cork, and this resource has decreased in value in sort of recent, I'd say like in the last 15 years, that's really been happening with artificial cork. Another example is lithium. People used to not really be very concerned with mineral lithium until we started making batteries and electronic devices out of it. And that skyrocketed the value of lithium because it's a little bit difficult to mine. It's not rare, but it's a little bit hard to come by. So lithium now is tremendously valuable, and we're mining it as fast as we can. Arrowheads are another example of a thing that used to have a pretty significant use valuation. They could be traded, they could be used. Now, obviously, we don't really need arrowheads anymore, so their use valuation has decreased significantly in the last 100 to 150 years. When we look at the dynamic nature of natural capital, it's important also to look at whole regions. And a really good example of this is the Arctic Circle, because due to the dynamic nature of our planet, especially in the face of climate change, the geography of the Arctic Circle is changing really fast. So ice is melting really quickly, and there are roughly $2 trillion of oil and mineral reserves underneath that ice. So an area where there didn't used to be a lot of use valuation questions is opening up for both the mineral reserves and the shipping route that's possible up there. And there's a real scramble in terms of Arctic land claims. They've already been made by Russia and Denmark, and Canada, Iceland, Norway, and the United States are all trying to figure out how they can make a land claim up there and take some part or control some part of the use valuation of this resource. The problem is that no one is ever really concerned with preserving the non-use valuation, and that's where environmental value systems come into play, because there's not enough ecocentric thinking at the levels of government and policy that deal with these decisions. This is all pretty technocentric and anthropocentrically driven. So this is all techno and anthro. Nobody really wants to get involved in the Arctic Circle just to keep it as a wildlife preserve, unfortunately. So with all that information about natural capital and how it can be valued, let's take a look at your homework. Your homework assignment for this class, if you're following along in the book, is to read pages 318 to 347. And if you are just doing the comprehension questions, you are doing another Paper 2, Section B, Part C. And your prompt is this: as resources become scarce, to what extent should potential damage to the environment limit our pursuit of knowledge and raw materials? So remember, you're answering that in an essay form. And I sort of feel like your reading pages are wrong, so I'm just going to double check them. Yeah, those are off. Your reading should be from 371 to 380. I'm going to cross this out. Sorry about that. 371 to 380. So if you're following along in the textbook, read that information first. And if you're not, you should get everything that you need to answer this prompt out of the PowerPoint. So take a stab at writing that essay, and when you are ready, I will see you in the review video. See you there.